Hey guys, what's up? So in this video, I would like to talk about the Enscape material library, and I would also like to produce a final render to see how our scene ended up. The Enscape material library is a very interesting resource because it's basically a collection of several materials completely configured and ready to use. And of course, this can accelerate a lot our workflow because we don't have to configure the materials from scratch. And to use the material library, we have to click here in the Enscape material library button up here. And this is a cloud-based collection, so it takes a little while to load all the materials because they are not stored in our computer at first. And here you can notice that the materials are actually very interesting and they are already configured with different maps like the normal map, the albedo, and the reflection. And you can look for the materials that you wish basically by browsing all of them here. And you can see that there are many options. You can also click here in a specific category. For example, I can click here and now we have just the concrete materials. We can also browse by typing up here the name of a specific material. So I can click here in all and then I can search for a specific name, for example, wood. And then we have all the materials with wood in their names. I can click here to clear my search. And you can also choose some materials to be saved as favorites. So when we click here in this little star, I'll choose some of them just to test. And then we click here in favorites. We have a group of materials that were assigned as favorites because probably we are going to use them a lot. So I'm going to go back here and click in all the materials. And I'll basically choose any of them just to test it out. For example, I'm going to choose this one here called Concrete 4. I'll click here. And if we want to use them in our file, we have to click here underneath in this button called Import Selection. So if we click here, we are going to download the material and we will be able to use it in our scene. So I'll click here. Okay, and now if I close this window and open my normal material editor here, you will notice that the material that we just downloaded is here and it's called Concrete 04. And you can notice that there is this little orange detail here showing that we've downloaded from the Enscape material library. And if you take a look at this specific material, you can see that we have the albedo map, we have the bump map, the roughness. So it's actually a very sophisticated material that we can use directly from the Enscape library. Okay, so let's make now a real test and we can maybe change this wooden floor here. So I will once again open my Enscape material library here. Okay, I will browse the different wood materials that we have in our library. So I will click here in the wood category. Okay, and maybe here I will choose this material called Wood 03 Basket Weave. And once I select it, I have to click here in Import Selection to download it to our scene. Then I can close this window. Okay, and here if I browse this material in our Enscape material library, we can see it here below. So I will select it now. Okay, and I'll basically apply this material to our floor. So this floor is actually part of a group. So I need to double click to enter the group. Now I can select basically this surface here so that I don't apply in other surfaces that I don't want to. So I can click now in my paint bucket tool and I'll click here. And now we have our material ready to go. So I can leave my group now by clicking the Ask button. And if we take a look at the material, you can see that we have a very good texture with the normal maps and also the reflections already being calculated. But we can make a few changes if we like. So for example, I can explore here the material settings and maybe I can decrease a little bit the height map because I would like to have a more polished finishing for this wood. So I can basically decrease a little bit the intensity, but not too much, just a little bit. I guess that maybe something around 70% is quite fine. I can also increase the roughness to make this wood more reflective. So maybe something around 30%. So you can see that we can use the materials from the Enscape material library, and of course we are free to make the changes that we need, and most of the time we'll probably need to make some few adjustments. And now I would like to show a procedure that can improve a lot our workflow, which is the possibility to change many materials at once. So for example, here in our scene, let's say that we would like to change this material here, which is applied to the floor of our balcony. It's also applied to this beam. So we have the same material applied to different objects in our scene. So I'm gonna use here my paint bucket and I will select this material, okay? And if I click here and choose the option Replace with Enscape Material, Enscape will open automatically the Enscape material library. And here we can choose any material to be used in the place of the existing one. So for example, I will choose here a brick, this one here. I think it's fine just to test it out, and then I can change to another one. And now if you take a look, instead of the previous button that we used, we have one called Replace. So if we click here and take a look at our scene, Enscape basically changed all the objects that had this material applied. So if we take a look at our rendering window, we have now bricks applied to the floor and also to this object up here. So this is a very interesting tool that improves significantly our workflow. And I don't want to use this brick material, so I'll basically do the procedure all over again. I will click here in this button, and notice that the name is actually the same as before. So of course we can change the name later if we want. But I'll click here once again and click in Replace with Enscape Material. And I'll try to find an interesting concrete material as we had before. So I'll click here in the concrete category. And maybe this one here is fine. So I'll click here. And once again, I'll click in Replace. Okay, so now we have a more suitable material, and it was applied to all the objects in our scene that had the previous material. And it's actually looking a bit dark, so basically I can reduce the image fade. So we will take a little bit of power of the texture, and now we'll probably get a lighter result. I think that now the material is quite fine. So this is a very interesting procedure that you can apply when you have to replace many materials at the same time that probably came with the SketchUp model. And now I would like to produce a final render to see how we actually managed to improve our scene materials. But first I will make some last adjustments here. So for example, I can select here this wood material and maybe decrease a little bit the roughness. So maybe around 40%, and it looks nicer now. I will do the same procedure here with our lights. So I will select this black material here and I will decrease a little bit the roughness and maybe increase the metallic value so we can have a little bit of reflection as well. Also the glass, we can select this glass here and I'll take a look in our rendered window here, and the roughness in this case is already very low, so maybe I can increase the specular and also reduce the opacity. So now we have a more interesting glass. Okay, and one last procedure here that would improve our scene is basically changing the screen of our TV, because this very self-illuminated result normally happens when we have a dark scene. But when we have a daylight scene, we normally don't perceive this self-illumination in a very intense way. So I'll basically turn this screen off. I will select this material. And here I will simply remove this image, okay? I will also change the type to a generic material, okay? I will choose here a dark gray color and I will reduce the roughness so we have a little bit of reflection. And actually maybe I'll choose a darker colors. I guess black is quite okay. So now we are basically simulating a turned off TV, and I think it's a little bit better. Okay, so now I can render my final image. I can basically close this Enscape material editor window. I can click here in this scene called Scene 01 so that I have my original camera view, and here we can click the save frame, and I can also synchronize my views so that our view in the Enscape window is the same as the one here in our scene. Okay, so this will be my final angle. And now I can open my visual settings to take a look at our final parameters. So I can increase the rendering quality. Of course, we can play around with the exposure and also with many parameters here in the image and atmosphere tabs, but I'm not so interested in this exercise. So I'll basically accept all the parameters as they are, and I will render my final image. So I'm going to click here in our screenshot button. I will choose a folder to save my file. Okay, I'm going to call this image material test, and I can save it as a JPEG image. And now, after a few seconds, we have our final rendering. And of course, you can notice that now the image is much more interesting with all the materials configured.